Morning or good afternoon as you prefer. Welcome to our midday briefing. Today is Monday, the 18th of December. Now, as most of you probably know, President von der Leyen traveled today to Nairobi, Kenya. This morning she met President William Ruto and witnessed the signing ceremony of the EU-Kenya Economic Partnership Agreement, on which we have published a press release. I invite you to consult it online for further details. The President continues her trip this afternoon to Kigali in Rwanda. There she will deliver an address at the launch ceremony of the BioNTech Africa, together with President Paul Kagame. The two presidents will then have a bilateral meeting, followed by press statements. You will be able to follow them live on EBS. That's it for the agenda of the President this week. As you are certainly aware, there is no college meeting this week on Wednesday, which allows me also to add we will therefore not have a college readout on Wednesday, and the last midday of the week will be tomorrow here in the press room. Thursday and Friday you can start to wind down, prepare for Christmas, but obviously we will remain available for your questions until the end of the week. Puis, je vous rappelle qu'aujourd'hui, les ministres de l'Environnement se réunissent pour le dernier Conseil environnement de l'année. Les commissaires Sinkevicius et Hoekstra représentent la Commission. Les ministres débattront de la proposition de la Commission relative à un règlement sur les emballages et les déchets d'emballage, qui constitue un élément essentiel du plan d'action en faveur de l'économie circulaire. Ils discuteront aussi de la loi sur la surveillance des sols dans le cadre de la stratégie de l'Union européenne pour les sols de 2030. De plus, le commissaire Hoekstra fera un compte-rendu de l'accord de la COP28 conclu à Dubaï le 13 décembre. Au cours d'un déjeuner ministériel, le Conseil débattra de manière informelle de l'objectif climatique de l'Union européenne à l'horizon 2040. Et dans l'après-midi, la Commission présentera son analyse des plans nationaux actualisés en matière d'énergie et de climat. Une conférence de presse aura lieu à l'issue de la réunion vers 17h40 avec la participation du commissaire Sinkevicius. Je vous invite donc à garder vos questions sur ces sujets et sur l'environnement en général pour cette conférence de presse. Voilà, that is all from us today. We can now move on to your questions. Rafaela.
Thank you very much, Eric. I have a question concerning the Austrian Raiffeisenbank International. As we know, it was on the Ukrainian list of war sponsors, or no, it still is. But however, RB's side is the status is suspended for the period of bilateral consultations involving representatives of the European Commission. So our question is, how exactly do these consultations look like? What are representatives of the Commission, what are they talking about with the Ukrainian counterparts? And furthermore, does the Commission think that RBI should be deleted from this list? Thank you.
Dan, if you can say a word in general, perhaps, about the situation. I'm not sure we can answer your questions in detail at this stage, Rafaela, but let's just take stock where we are.
No, indeed, thanks, Rafaela. We wouldn't have anything to say on this, as you're talking about the Ukrainian list here and not the EU list, so it would be beyond me now to go commenting on the Ukrainian list. When it comes to the sanctions package in general, as you know, this is working its way through the Council. This is the 12th package of sanctions that we're talking about here. Stay tuned for possible updates on this later this afternoon. But on your specific question, no, it's not for me to comment on.
Follow-up.
Thank you. But I guess then that from the part of the Commission, you could tell us what is the Commission aiming in concerning the consultations. So why are you talking to, as there is cited that there are consultations going on with representatives of the Commission. So what's the aim of the Commission when talking to the Ukrainian counterpart concerning this list? Thank you.
I think Dan said we will, for the moment, we have no further comments to make. If we do, we will come back to you at a later stage on this. Yeah.
Jarno Hartikainen, Helsingin Sanomat. Whose idea was it to have these consultations? Was it the Commission's initiative? Thank you.
Dan, can we say anything on this?
No, look, I'm sorry, I don't have specific details on these consultations. As you can expect, we are in constant contact with all of our partners, and particularly in Ukraine when it comes to sanctions packages, but I'm not going to go into specifics.
Look, for us, for the moment, what is important is that we understand that the Council has now moved one step further in terms of the adoption process of the 12th sanctions package. We're waiting for official news on the finalization of this, and then if that does take place, we can come back this afternoon later with further details. For the moment, that's all we can say. So I will close that chapter. Stay tuned. We move on to other issues. David.
Thank you. Eric, it's on migration. Yeah. 61 migrants died in the sea this weekend. They left from Libya. I'm wondering if you have any comment on what happened. Frontex plane saw the target well before the accident took place. And NGO vessels, the Ocean Viking, was in the area, but was ordered by the Italian authorities to go to Livorno because they have had already rescued some migrants, and as you know, the Italian rules foreseen that NGOs vessels can do just one search and rescue, and then they have to leave the area. And finally, the survivors were pushed back in Libya by cargo vessels with the Gibraltar flag, but owned by Netherlands company, and with the responsibility of the subsidiary company in Italy. So I'm wondering if you have a comment on what happened, and also how it's possible that the EU, a major geopolitical actor, cannot save 61 people at risk in the sea. Thank you.
Thank you. On the exact events that you just described, I don't know if we can say anything from an operational point of view, Anna or Peter. We are not in a position to make a comment on this. We, of course, regret any loss of life in the Mediterranean, as you know. This is an issue that was once again discussed at the European Council last week. You have seen the letter which the President had sent to the leaders before the European Council. We are working on all the different aspects, on all the different initiatives that we have set out in order to try to come to a system where we can manage to the best of our ability migration to Europe. But we have no specific comment to make on this incident, except to say, on this tragedy, except to say, of course, that we regret the loss of life. Follow-up, David.
Yes, thank you. Last week there was a report on Frontex basically cooperating with militia, Wagner-supported militia, the militia of Haftar, in the managing of migration. Now we have a situation where a plane of Frontex saw a target, but basically they didn't anything. I know that I should contact Frontex, but the point is that you have a seat in the board, management board of Frontex. So are you going to ask Frontex some explanation why they are so proactive in cooperating with Haftar militias. By the way, they are human traffickers, and with operations that, at the end of the day, are refoulement of migrants. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I believe that Frontex actually provided their explanations as to the incident that you are referring to, and that they clearly said that they were not cooperating with anybody but transmitting information about a ship which was in need of rescue. Now, for the rest, indeed, I would ask you to contact Frontex. Any other questions on migration for us today? Mose.
Thanks, Eric. In fact, I had also a related question which David raised, because I just wrote an article yesterday about Frontex role in these incidents. He was referring to communicating data about migrant vessels in distress, which reaches obviously this Libyan militia. And you said last week that you couldn't comment on that, but we should contact Frontex, which I indeed did last week, asking for some comments or some specific questions, but they never replied to me. And as David said, the Commission has 2 representatives in the managing board of Frontex who would expect that the Commission knows what's happening and what they're discussing. What is your comment to that?
I have no comment to that. I'm not responsible to explain why Frontex has not answered the questions that you have asked them, Mose. Clearly, we play our role on the management board of Frontex. I see no further hand raised on migration, so we move on to other issues. Yes, please.
Thank you, Eric. Gerardo Fortuna from Euronews. There was this press release from the company Lumina yesterday saying that they're divesting from Grail, which was a cancer test cancer test manufacturer who was acquired by Illumina. So I'd like to know if the Commission has some comment on this announcement, and if you expect Illumina to follow the suggestion made by DG Comp when it comes to this process of basically selling off this company.
Leah, I'm not sure I understood your question, but Leah seems to have understood it much better than I. So let's see what comment she can make.
Thank you for the question, but I'm afraid that we cannot make any comments on this. As you know, we have opened a phase 2 in-depth investigation on the 22nd of July, and that's all I can recall at the moment.
Any other question on competition issues for Leah? It's not the case. Any other issues for us today? Oh, my God. Rafaela.
Thank you very much. I think it's a question for Johannes, as I just saw on his X account that the Commission opens formal proceeding against X under the Digital Services Act. So there's just a question, if you could give us further information about this proceeding, about the time frame. Am I correct that this is the first formal proceeding now launched by the Commission to enforce the DSA? And can we expect other proceedings like this? Thank you.
Thank you. Johannes.
Yeah, thank you, Rafaela. Schönen guten Tag. To start with the second and third question, yes, this is the first time we launch a proceeding against a company or a very large online platform under the DSA. The last question, I cannot speculate about other proceedings in the future. On this one, so yes, today we opened formal proceedings against X based on several suspected infringements of the Digital Services Act. The opening of proceedings means that the Commission will now investigate X's systems and policies related to certain suspected infringements. It does not prejudge the outcome of the investigation, nor does it signal that the Commission considers that X is compliant with all other obligations under the DSA. The Commission will continue monitoring ICS's compliance with all obligations under the DSA, and it has suspicions of other infringements. It will then take necessary steps. The opening of formal proceedings prevents the digital services coordinators and national competent authorities from exercising their supervisory powers vis-à-vis ICS with respect to the specific infringements included in the decision and falling under their shared competence with the Commission, and we invite ICS to cooperate with us in this investigation. In the press release you will see the articles to which this relates. You can look this up in the background. I can go into a little bit more detail if you're interested, saying what we look at specifically. And I can already say we will do a briefing call at 1 o'clock for those who are interested in this. We have sent this to all journalists who are accredited to the institutions and have selected digital topics. But if anyone has changed their minds or wants to follow this in addition, please get in touch with Thomas Renier and we send you the link. So the infringement focuses on the potential dissemination of illegal content in the EU, in particular the assessment and mitigation of risk linked to the dissemination of illegal content in the EU Article 34/35 and the flagging mechanism for illegal content. Then second, the effectiveness of measures taken to combat information manipulation on the platform. And here it's notably the effectiveness of the community node system that ICSIS uses, and the related policies mitigating risk to civic discourse and electoral processes. The third point is measures to increase the transparency of ICSIS platform. Here it's about suspected shortcomings in giving researchers access to ICS, to publicly accessible data, which is an obligation under the DSA. And it's also about the shortcomings of ICSIS at repository. And then the fourth point is suspected deceptive design of the user interface, notably in relation to the check marks linked to certain subscription products, the so-called blue checks.
Thank you very much. Any other questions on this issue for Johannes? Mose.
Thanks again. Not exactly this issue, but it's related to infringement procedures against member states. It's about European Court of Auditors report last week. Okay? No?
No, clearly, Mose, we are for the moment on the process that the Commission has just launched, not against a member state, but against a company, X. So before we move on to other issues, let me see if there are other questions for Johannes on this. No other questions on digital-related issues for Johannes. That is also not the case. Mose, you can now ask your question.
But maybe it's a question for Johannes because it's about infringement procedures. I think that the Commission recently has launched new infringement procedures against member states, also in the area of energy and transport. And that brings me to my question, because European Court has published a report last week about EU's biofuels policy. And, the Commission accepted all these recommendations, but the Court also noted that the Commission had not launched any infringement procedures against the majority of member states that not had, let's say, achieved its targets when it comes to the use of biofuels. And that was by the cut-off date of the report in spring. And I couldn't find any information about that later on, so I wonder if there indeed have been any infringement procedures since that report, let's say, was finalized. Thank you.
Okay, just for the record, Mose, infringements can happen in all areas. Johannes is not responsible for infringements in general, right? He's responsible for issues related to his portfolio, which is digital. On issues related to energy and renewable targets, it would be Tim. Now, I don't know if we have any information to give on infringement procedures. No, we don't, following that European Court of Auditors report. You know, in any case, that we communicate on infringements on a regular basis. The Commission takes decisions on this on a regular basis, so you can follow this in the subsequent infringement rounds. Okay, I think, David, you had a question on another subject. No? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, Andy Bounds from the Financial Times. Given 2 members of the European Council have tested positive for COVID, Kaja Kallas and Olaf Scholz, I just wonder what precautions the President's taken ahead of a trip to Kenya or during that trip to avoid any spread of the disease. Thanks.
Thanks. I'm sure that the President has taken necessary precautions. That would assume that what you say, that she has actually been in close contact with them for specific amounts of time. Now, the rules in Belgium have evolved significantly since the peak of the pandemic. So I have no further comment to make on this. Thank you. Any other question for us today? Catherine.
Yeah, I have a question for Peter, I think. Over the weekend, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared his pride in having prevented the establishment of a Palestinian state. Given that this is one of the HRVP's priorities, how can this political solution be advanced if the government in power in Israel at the moment are not in the slightest bit interested?
Peter. Thank you, Catherine. First of all, it's not position of the High Representative. This is something that the EU as such, so 27 member states are endorsing, plus a number of international partners. The only sustainable way out of the current situation is the two-state solution. And international efforts are ongoing to put some meaning and some concrete content into this two-state solution, as explained on a number of occasions in the margins of the European Council, Foreign Affairs Councils, and international related meetings. But of course, I mean, without commenting on individual remarks at this particular time, this is the view of the European Union and a number of international partners, that the only sustainable solution can be the two-state solution.
Follow up.
But you need an interlocutor for that. And it's very clearly not the position of the current Prime Minister, and certainly not of the even more extreme parts of the current Israeli government. So what tools do you have in order to bring them to the table?
Of course, it is absolutely crucial that the two main parties of the conflict are able to see the advantages for them, the advantages of any suggested solution. So, of course, the European Union cannot impose anything, but this is what we are doing, what we are trying to do with our partners, to work with both sides, with Palestinians on one hand, with Israelis on the other hand, to make sure that eventually they will be able to sit down and negotiate. And, of course, again, we will not be commenting individual remarks given in a specific context. We've seen a lot of statements, a lot of declarations in the heat of the still ongoing campaign in Gaza. But when the, so to speak, dust settles, then it will be obvious for everyone that this is not a sustainable way out to feed constantly the cycle of violence. This is what the European Union was saying long before the 7th of October attacks by Hamas. So our efforts and our tools are engagement and concerted efforts with international partners, with everyone who have any kind of links and influence over the one party or another party, to make sure that they finally are ready to be open for this solution.
Other questions on this? Mose.
Yes, thanks again. I would like to take the opportunity to ask you, Peter. As you said, I mean, the focus is, of course, on ending this war and bring about a sustainable ceasefire. But there's still a risk of another war, which could, I mean, talking about the North against Hezbollah. And the question is, I would like to ask you if you know if the High Representative is some way planning or involved in any efforts to find a diplomatic solution to the problem in the North, which is, I suppose, the question about the implementation of the United Nations Security Council resolution from the previous war back in 2006, I think.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mose. Of course, I mean, this is not a separate track. The situation in the north and the low-intensity conflict between Israel and Hezbollah on the Lebanese side, which is happening. This is part of the overall effort, because what we were saying, the priority is to prevent spillover, regional spillover. So we are, of course, in the context of the outreach and engagement of the European Union and the representatives of the European Union, because it's not only the High Representative, is to also to tackle the situation in relation to Lebanon, specifically to Hezbollah. And this is, when we are talking about High Representative, this is something he constantly raises in his engagements, for example, with the Iranian counterparts. It's very important, but it's part of the same efforts, the same bulk of the efforts which are focused on prevent the regional spillover.
Thank you. Any other questions for Peter on other foreign policy topics? If that is not the case, thank you, Peter. Any other questions for us today? Catherine.
Yeah, it's a question about I'm just wondering if it's possible to have an update on the humanitarian aid situation. We've heard that there's been another border opening, this time via Israel. And I'm just wondering if you could tell us about the access that is currently available. I mean, we saw a delegation of MEPs recently, and there seemed to be like one truck going through every hour. So that seems wholly inadequate. And we also heard reports over the weekend, particularly from a British MEP who has family within the Holy Church in Gaza, that if you go out of your house, you are taking the risk of being killed by snipers. And we've seen very clear indiscriminate killing throughout Gaza. So I just want to ask you about first the access of the aid, how that's getting through, any speed on that, and then what about the access to the aid once it arrives in Gaza? If people are too scared to go out and seek water, or they might be desperate and have to, what can be done to aid that situation? Thank you.
Yeah, Balázs.
Yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity to take a look at where we are, and indeed the situation remains very difficult and dire. So in terms of the figures, we made an announcement about 10 days ago, already announcing our aid for next year in order to make it clear that the humanitarian partners that we have in the Gaza Strip and the Palestinian people can count on us going forward. So we announced another budget of around 120 million euro for next year for the Palestinian people in humanitarian aid. We also continue with our humanitarian air bridge flights. If I count well, we have carried out 28 since the beginning of the hostilities on the 7th of October, carrying over 1,200 tons of essential supplies. And I can also confirm that we have another 5 in the pipeline for the month of December. So this project will continue. But you are very right in raising again the issue of humanitarian access, because all this is worth nothing if the aid doesn't get to the people in need. So the way we proceed is such that the humanitarian cargo gets to the nearest airport. This is in El Arish. This is the El Arish International Airport in Egypt. We hand over the material to the Egyptian Red Cross. They bring it to the Rafah crossing point. They hand it over to the Palestinian Red Cross. And they then distribute it further among the humanitarian partner organizations that we have within the Gaza Strip. And of course, going forward, we will continue to raise the issue of humanitarian access with all the interlocutors that we have on the ground, whether it be through the Rafah crossing point. If additional points can be opened up, that's of course also welcome. But what matters for us is that the aid gets to the people in need.
Follow-up, Catherine.
I'm not an expert in this field, but as an occupying force, Israel does have responsibilities for those territories. Yes, we're providing a humanitarian aid, but shouldn't Israel, as the occupying force, be responsible for ensuring that population has access to food, water, electricity, fuel? Thank you.
We have said time and time again that we call on Israel to respect international humanitarian law. And therefore, our position on this is extremely is extremely clear. Now, as Balázs has said, we do not deliver the aid ourselves inside Gaza. We work with NGOs and humanitarian organizations. But as to our position as to how things should be happening in Gaza, on which we have no direct controls, obviously, we have repeated the call that Israel should respect international humanitarian law.
So, sorry, just a small clarification on that. So, in that case, you're saying Israel is not respecting international humanitarian law?
No, that's not what I've said. I've said what we have called Israel to do.
Yeah, but if there's no access to water, then they're not respecting it, are they?
And we have called for humanitarian pauses in order for the aid to be delivered. This is a position of the European Union, not just of the Commission, but of the European Union as expressed in the conclusions of the Council. We're not going to be making comments as to whether or not this is the case or not. Our position, as very clearly expressed, is that we call on Israel to respect international humanitarian law, and we call for humanitarian pauses in order for the aid to be brought to the people in need in Gaza. Any other questions on humanitarian aid for Balázs? No. Sorry, for Balázs? On something else? Yeah, David.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's on the inquiry that the Ombudsman opened in March on third parties financing travel of high-ranking official of the Commission. I've seen that the Ombudsman closed the inquiry, the investigation, some days ago, but asked the European Commission to provide to the public, to us, the statistics of travels paid by third parties. I'm wondering if you are going to do that, to provide us with the statistics, because in the documents of the Ombudsman, you send to the Ombudsman, they are blacked, so impossible to read. Thank you.
Yeah, so of course we always we have good contacts with the European Ombudsman, and every time they come with recommendations towards us, we do our utmost to follow up on those. So I would have to look into this particular recommendation. I would have to look into this particular recommendation and see how we intend to follow up and keep you posted.
Thank you. Mose, you'll have to wait for a minute. I have Maria on Interactio on another issue.
Hello, it's again for the humanitarian aid, because according to senior Cypriot government officials, a British support ship loaded with humanitarian aid for Gaza sailed from the port of Larnaca on Saturday. I wanted to know, Balázs, if you know about it, if you are, if you are informed, and what is happening, what is the state of play for the Cyprus Sea corridor to Gaza for the humanitarian aid, given the fact that President Christodoulidis said that the British ship is able to arrive to Gaza even if the port is destroyed. Thank you.
Balázs.
Yeah, indeed, Maria. So this is true that we are looking at all ways of getting aid into Gaza, not only via the classical channel of providing assistance to or funding to humanitarian partner organization, but also, as I said, via humanitarian air bridge flights. And we've gone actually even beyond this, and we are looking at the maritime route as well. Now, to my knowledge, the latest is that discussions continue to be ongoing on this issue. Now, if a third country, a non-EU country, is able to pull off a humanitarian operation from Cyprus towards the Gaza Strip, of course, it's a welcome development. Every effort counts, and it's good that international actors are engaged in trying to get humanitarian supplies to the people in need in Gaza. As far as European Union, we are involved. We are in touch with the relevant actors, including the government of Cyprus, on the potential maritime corridor. But there is nothing at this stage that I could confirm.
Thank you. Any other questions on humanitarian aid for Balázs? That is not the case. Thank you, Balázs. Mose, you had another question.
Yes, thanks again. Maybe this is also for Balázs because it's related to the previous question about the Commission's replies to the Ombudsman's inquiries on different topics. And one topic is, as you know, the issue of the EU-Tunisia memorandum, where the Ombudsman asked some questions about the respect of human rights and so on in that memorandum. And I heard before that the Commission's reply was expected in mid-December, but the latest I heard from the Ombudsman that it has been delayed until sometime next year. So my question is why, and would that mean, for example, will that somehow have an impact on the plans to sign similar new agreements of this type with other countries in North Africa, for example, Egypt? Thank you.
I'm not sure whether we can provide any information on that. Anna?
Thanks a lot for the question, Moses. So we can confirm that the Commission actually asked the European Ombudsman for extension for replies. I mean, this is it's nothing unusual. It's in the interaction between the EU institutions and the Ombudsman as a whole. We can confirm that there is an extension for reply until the 25th of January 2024. And I don't think that one has absolutely anything to do with the other. I mean, every case is obviously individual. And as the President said, we are working on a comprehensive partnership also with Egypt.
Thank you. I come back to Maria. Perhaps you had a follow-up and it didn't show up sufficiently quickly.
No, Eric, thank you. It's, I think, a question on Anna on the Serbian elections. If you have any reaction, any first comment, especially because there are some allegations that the procedure of the voting was not exactly correct. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the question, Maria. So obviously we've been following the elections very closely. As you know, we will, as always, we refrain from commenting until, as you know, the OSCE and ODIHR have made also their preliminary assessment of the elections. We understand that this will take place later in the afternoon, so we will be glad to come back to you afterwards.
Thank you. Any other questions for Anna? Not the case. Any other issues for us today? No. Thank you very much. See you tomorrow for the last midday.